So it's day 18 of my 40 days of truth for Lent. Um, I had to tell my father the truth today because he'd asked me to do something, and truth was I didn't want to do it, and maybe it's morally questionable. He had asked me because his ex-girlfriend's mother passed away, and he asked me to play bagpipes at her funeral. And my immediate knee-jerk reaction was to say yes. I was like, of course, like, it's so sad that her mother passed away. In fairness, her mother was not well and was very poorly treated by her. And like, it was sort of an unfortunate situation because her mother had dementia, was sort of like you'd have to feed her and change her and all that stuff. So I don't think it was much of a life personally, and I wouldn't have wanted to live that way. But on top of that, to have to deal with abuse from your daughter while you're, like, she just wasn't kind to her. And I had thought about it because I told him I would do it must have been on Thursday. And today, when I missed my kickboxing class because I slept, I overslept. That was a bad idea to take a nap in the afternoon. 5 minutes turns into 3 hours. When I realized that I would only have 2 more weeks of kickboxing, and that I didn't really want to lend my skill to an event that was essentially like just pomp and circumstance. Maybe I should have done it. Maybe I should have told him I'd do it and followed through, but I didn't want to do it. And it got me thinking about truth and appearances. Because this lady she's not a bad person, but she's not a good person. But she goes to church every Sunday. And she's abusive and volatile a lot of the time. Like, she takes care of her son's son, so her grandson, because when he was born, father was like in his teens, and like I said, he's my godson. He calls me Jack. Jack, poor kid, doesn't like to be there. He gets everything that he needs. Like, he has his PlayStation, he has a nice home and everything, but he doesn't like to be around her alone all the time because she's very strict, and she's one of those people that will have all these cushions on a perfect couch and won't want you to sit on it. Like, I didn't know her mother very well, and I don't generally consider her a close person in my life. And the last funeral that I played was for my grandfather, and I was thinking about what it would appear like in my head to lend the same service that I did my own relative, my grandfather, who was very important to my family, was very important to my mother, to lend the same skill to someone that I don't respect and whose mother I did not know. It felt wrong. It felt wrong. And I just told him that I couldn't do it. I just didn't want to. And that was the truth. I had to tell him. I had to, because I wasn't going to get to the last day and be like, sorry, I can't do it. But I'm going to pass the buck off to a colleague, anyone who is willing to do it. I have a network of pipers in the city that I can ask the question to. And it just got me thinking about appearances, because like, she didn't really like her mother very much, or if she did, she hid it really well. So the idea of having a piper there was more to show other people the level of care, if that makes any sense. I think that she just wanted to show other people that she could get a Piper, or that her mother deserved one. And it sounds horrible. I know. I feel like I'm just like completely, I feel like I'm being a bad person about this. But if you understood the level of abuse that her mother had to endure in her final years from her, it just feels like a lie. Like, it just felt like a lie, and I didn't want to partake in it, because I'm like, if I'm not feeling it, if my gut is telling me don't do this, I'm trying to like listen to my gut. And I just said no. I told my dad, and he was upset, but you know, I want to play for my grandmother's funeral. I want to play for my mother's funeral, and I want to play for my dad's funeral. And I don't want to give a freebie, because like, this reason why they ask me is because they're like, oh, well, you're part of the Black community, you'll do it for cheap or free. And that's pretty much how it always works. I don't want to extend the same level of care without pay to someone that I have no emotional connection with. God, I'm listening to myself say this, and this person just lost her mother, and I'm like, wow, you're a bad person, Terry. But I don't feel like a bad person for saying it, because it is the honest to God's truth. That poor woman was mistreated, and thank goodness my father was there to help care for her, because if not, then she would have had just abuse all the time, and she probably would have died a little bit sooner. I also have an aunt that is in a home right now because she has dementia, alcohol-induced dementia. That place is probably the saddest place on earth. I visited maybe twice. The first time it was new, so I guess they were trying a little bit harder to make it seem like it was okay. But the second time I was like, oh my God, get me out of here. Get me out of here. Because when I walked in, we all have to do the whole like hand sanitizing thing and whatnot. And when I walked into the ward that she was at, there was a woman that was screaming that she wanted to die. And she just kept screaming the whole time that she wanted to die. And there's like little TV on wheels that you used to have in elementary school in the corner, just playing rubbish. And everybody's just sitting around the table doing nothing. And then they eat, and then they do nothing. And she couldn't tell me who I was. She didn't know what was going on, really. She kept talking about, that she's going to see her sisters who are dead tomorrow. Like, tomorrow I'm going to see this sister, and then I'm going to go to this place the next day and do this, and I have my degrees. And she remembers certain things, but she can't remember who I am. She'll remember who my mom is sometimes, but dementia, that is a horrible, horrible disease. And to lose one's mind, I feel, is hell on earth. It must be. I mean, the lucid moments that you have and you realize what you're losing, it must be so difficult, because it's so difficult to watch. And my aunt in her lucid days was not a very good person. She was always very kind to me, but she was only kind to me because my skin was light. That's sort of the way that it works in the Caribbean. The darker you are, the less prestige you have. And it's still existent today. Like, when I went to Jamaica in 2008, the women there hated me. And the men there catcalled me all the time. And that's just the culture. That's how men approach women. They just shout things at them or cackle things at them, whatever. And I couldn't go anywhere by myself. I had to always be escorted by my uncle or my aunt, and that's just because of the color of my skin. Not really so much looks or whatever. It's just if you're light skinned, then they want you more apparently. And I can understand why people in that area would be that way in a sense, but I mean, like, it's just so messed up. It's so messed up in the Black community. It's like, I've talked about this before, that you're just not Black enough, like, I'm lighter than both of my parents for some reason, probably the European ancestry, maybe, I'm not sure. But I feel like I'm constantly having to prove to people that I'm Black enough to have an opinion. I have to constantly get into my background and play the identity politics game to actually be heard. And it's so frustrating. It's so frustrating to have this background of Caribbean people. Like, my entire childhood was just full of everything Black. We'd have weddings and there would be soca music. We'd all do the dollar wine. I'd go to the Caribbean almost every summer with my mom when she was taking care of her property. I was immersed in that culture. I know it so well. I've been to these places. I understand the way that they think. I understand. And to have to get into that in order to tell them, like, look, what you're doing right now is not helping you. It's not helping you. To be accused of being indoctrinated by white people, by white conservatives, when I say my opinion, is so aggravating. I don't have the words. I just don't have the words for it. It's like I almost need to, like, post a picture of both of my parents and then get into my entire story. Be like, I lived in Jamaica for like months. I lived in Grenada for months. I understand the way the culture works. I understand it. The way that the culture works here makes no sense. It makes no sense because they feel this affinity to their roots, and it's all based on the color of their skin. Like, I play bagpipes. Nobody in my family plays bagpipes. I do tattoos. Nobody in my family does tattoos. Tattoos are not a thing that's done in the Caribbean very often because, like I said, Black skin generally is, you can't get the same contrast. I mean, like, you can't get the same detail actually on darker skin that you can on light skin. It's just a fact. You have to build or imply details with contrast. So you can only use like black ink essentially. And you can't use any white ink because it turns into keloids more often on black skin than it does on white. So, and I have these likes that are, I don't know if it makes any sense. My parents never exposed me to this stuff. I learned who the Beatles were when I was in college. I have huge gaps in my cultural knowledge just because my entire upbringing was reggae, soca, dance hall, like rock steady and calypso and stuff. Like, my entire upbringing was extremely Black. Let's just say that it was a Black upbringing, a Black Caribbean upbringing. So when I have to justify what I think by telling people my life story, it makes me play their game, which pisses me off. And I don't want to have to play that game. I would like for everyone's thoughts and everyone's opinions to matter regardless of the color of their skin. I would like for somebody to be able to understand that lived experience does not mean that they're an expert. Just because I lived in these places and because I lived a life that was entirely Black on both sides of my family, there's not like a white side and a Black side that I came from, and then I can go back to like white people and be like, here's what they think and here's what the Black people think. No, I didn't have that. What I had was a Black upbringing, and then I had university, college first in film studies, and then university in film studies, communications, gender studies, and a few courses dealing with film propaganda and jazz. So I had the full package for an indoctrinated social justice warrior, and I was one, and I was damn good at it too. I was very good because I was the right blend of things, someone who is female and Black-ish and has such a background and da 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 da, and I go on and on. I know I could just be like, look, part Taino Indian on my mom's side, and my dad's side is like part Welsh because they were owned by Welsh slave owners 4 generations ago or 5 generations ago, because I could go into that, but I don't think it has anything to do with me. And that's the problem, is that people are looking at history and they're like, well, historically, such and such and such and such. And I'm like, what about right now? Think about right now. If you have to be cognizant of history. This is a fact. Like we know our history from our respective countries, whether it's American, Canadian, Australian, New Zealand, whatever. We know our history. Being cognizant of history does not mean living in it. You have to be cognizant of history, but you have to live in the present moment. Saying things like, historically, we were treated badly. Historically, this, that, the other. I think that it's detrimental to progress, because what you're saying when you say historically this and that is that there's been no improvement. So the way that I think about it is the people that engage in identity politics see this ladder, and they see white people at the top of this ladder and that they're climbing it, right? So let's say that 300 years ago, 500 years ago, whatever, a certain group started at the bottom, and they've climbed and climbed and climbed and climbed, and the ladder is 100 meters long. They get to meter 80, and someone says, how much left do you have to go? And then they just tell them the length of the whole ladder. And that's not the way that it works. I think that right now, as far as rights go, as far as knowledge and applied laws, like as far as everything goes, we've all got equal opportunity. If you have the skill set, if you have the work ethic, if you have the mindset, you can do pretty much anything. If you have this, if you obviously you need to have the skills. So for me, I would never be a cop, and it's not because I don't want, I would love to have the skills and the motivation to want to do it, but I know I would be a bad one, so I don't do it. My skill set is in the arts. So I try to make that work for me. And if people could just stop fighting the past, if they could just stop fighting the past, I feel like there would be more room for them to understand their present situations. I feel like if people could stop using the past as a pass for actually acquiring skills, we could be great. And I mean, there's still a little SJW left in me. I know that there is, because I still have that bleeding heart of a liberal, and I'm trying to temper it with facts and with knowledge. But when people can't learn from mistakes, current mistakes even, when entire countries do things that have been disastrous for countries that are similar to them, I hope for them to reap what they sow, because the only way that people like that learn is through failure. And unfortunately, when I say that, it comes across as cold, because there are actual human beings that will suffer, that don't really want what a government would want on their behalf. And it's up to them to figure that shit out, because we all have a job to make where we're living better in some way. I mean, the only way that I see that I can help at this point is by having by sharing my gift, but doing it in a way that is honest and that helps other people. A lot of my clients, they refer to my tattoo sessions that I give them as almost like therapy, because we chat while I'm tattooing them, and we have a good laugh. Not too many, because line work has to be good. We have a good laugh. We talk about any range of subjects, whether it's politics or music or different types of art, or what's going on in their lives. And I feel like if we had a little bit more of that, that if we had a little more discussion, instead of just broadly assuming that people can't have certain thoughts or can't have certain opinions unless they are themselves an affected group, I feel like we could probably get a little bit further, just as a race, as a human race. Because I mean, that's how I see it. In my view, I have always felt very close to different types of cultures, like the Scottish culture, and that is predominantly white. And it's not because there are white people, it's just because that's the way that the cookie crumbled. I just ended up being a part of a Highland pipe band and being immersed in that culture. So I feel like there's a lot of expectations for us to mirror what our appearance is in the way we live our lives. And there really shouldn't be that pressure. I don't think that there should be. When people at work tell me, maybe you'll get the post before me because you're black and female and they want that, I just feel so like deflated. Like, it doesn't matter how hard you work. It does, even if you worked really hard and you ended up doing super well. If there was somebody who was just as qualified and just as in need, then your skin would matter. And I feel like it just feels so shitty. It makes me not even want to try. Like, why should I try if their mandate is to have more people that look like me? If I don't try, then I still get the job. So where's the incentive? I don't know. I'm rambling. I know I'm rambling. I feel like there's so much out there. There's so much opportunity. There's so much to be had. And everybody's so caught up on appearance. They're so caught up on it. I mean, I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. I just feel like with the way that I was brought up, people sort of expect there to be a completely different product. Um, but the good thing about being an individual is that you are an individual. You get to make decisions for yourself, and you get to have your likes and your dislikes. And I happen to like classical Hollywood musicals more than anything. Watch like My Fair Lady. I could watch that movie 100 times. And when I was in animation class in college, I'd have this 6.5 hour break, and I would go to the media room and I would watch My Fair Lady every single Thursday during that 6.5 hour break. And then when that was done, I would go into the basement and read classics. I would read like Dante's Inferno and stuff, and I learned a couple of Latin things because, like I told you, I really like Latin. I would just write and write and read, think about musicals, and then I'd go to animation class and I would draw. So everybody has their strengths, everybody has their likes and dislikes, and I don't think that I should be expected to have to justify my thoughts or to buttress them with identity politics just to get through to someone who is touting that bullshit. I feel like that is the most racist garbage that there is, to tell someone, well, my lived experience is more important than yours, or your lived experience has nothing to do with the way that blacks are treated. And I'm just like, get the fuck out of here. Like, just actually get the fuck out. Because I find that is so offensive. And I don't take offense to a lot of things, but I get offended when people force me to tell them details about my upbringing just so that I can have an opinion. Like, oh, by the way, I'm black. When I have to say that, I know that we have failed. We have failed to execute a vision of equality. Because if things were equal, then I would never have to do that. If things were equal, I would never have to tell someone what my sexual orientation is in order to have an opinion on the LGBTQ movement. I would never have to do that. I would never have to. Look, things aren't equal. And the reason why things aren't equal is not because of the right. It is not. The reason things aren't equal is because we've reverted back to this place where color matters. And you find the same shit in third world countries, because I lived in Jamaica and that place is like a third world country. And if y'all want to go back to that, then I don't want to be a part of it. If we want to go to a place where Black people are dyeing their skin, they're bleaching their skin in order to look lighter, I don't want to go to a place like that. And we have it so good here, and it could be great if we could just get over this idea that appearance has anything to do with an individual's thoughts. Like, why can't I have an opinion that's contrary to my racial group? Why? Is it because I'm indoctrinated by white people? Is it because I've always been around white people? Well, no, because my whole family is Black. And I would say that my entire family would fall under that category of like very proud Black people. So I don't understand why I'm rambling. I know I'm rambling, and I'm really sorry. I'm just so over it. I'm over it. I'm over having to explain to people that I am Black. Like, just fucking listen to what I have to say, or don't say anything. But don't bring up this whole, like, go back to your cave, people, or whatever. Like, go back to the cave from which you came. Like, that shit is fucking retarded. It is retarded. And I'm going to use that word because I love that word. I love the word retarded. I love the word gay. I say it. I say it. And I don't mean it in the sense of like someone who's mentally disabled or someone who is homosexual. I just say them because I'm a 90s kid and I'm not sacrificing that part of my life. There. I said it. Anyway, that's day 18. And I'm sorry for the rant. But I needed to rant. And if you got through the entire 30 minutes, then cool. And I'll see y'all tomorrow. Have a good one.